and we are continuing our discussion about the history of media. Here we're going to get into the more modern era of media, talking about cable and in particular satellite communications and the internet. And so this will bring us up to the present day. With cable, it is ironic that cable actually was developed to extend the reach of broadcast TV, over-the-air TV, your local TV stations. And the idea of cable is that an antenna, a receiving antenna, is placed on a hill. It's a very tall antenna. Then you put it on a hill to make the elevation even greater. And that improves the reception for the broadcast TV signals coming from, say, 75 miles away or so. In our case here in Commerce, it's not quite that far, but maybe 65 or 70 miles away. And then people pay to have a cable, literally, run from that antenna into their home, and they pay a monthly fee. Now, this is something that is done on an entrepreneurial basis, and especially it was in the beginning. It was very typically done at the local level, not something the government did. But an entrepreneurial thing with people realizing that a lot of folks would pay to get better TV reception. And that's how cable started. Of course, it developed into something much more than its original very modest sort of beginnings. Cable regulation, we have gone back and forth on cable regulation. The broadcasters had influence with Congress and tried to receive some protection against competition from cable in the beginning. One thing that the FCC put into place is called the must-carry rule, and this is still in effect today. It says the cable system in your community must carry the local TV channels. So, for example, Commerce is considered part of the Dallas market, and the cable system here, which is now called Spectrum Cable, must carry all of the Dallas TV channels, not only the major ones, 4, 5, 8, 11, 13, but all of the others as well. And so that was put into effect essentially at the insistence of the broadcasters to provide themselves with some protection. Generally, cable is less closely regulated than over-the-air broadcasting, and of course the reason for that is that you pay to bring cable into your home. If you don't want it in your home, then don't pay to bring it into your home. And we will talk further about some of the rules that apply to broadcasters that do not apply to cable as a result of that. But basically, cable is something that you have the choice of whether to bring it into your home or not, whereas broadcasting does come into your home whether you want it to or not. Those signals, over-the-air signals, do come into your home. So cable as we know it, with hundreds of channels, starts with communication satellites. And the first communication satellite was Telstar, went up in 1962. And I think you'll enjoy, there's an old newsreel video there on the Telstar from 1962 going up. But really everything that we're familiar with now in terms of electronic communications depends on communication satellites. Certainly your cell phone communications depend on communication satellites. And as you watch this video, which only lasts about 3 minutes, you'll see that they refer to telephone calls. And so they were right on the money in terms of predicting what the communication satellites would mean. But one thing that it did bring was cable TV, as we know it, not just a thing that is repeating the nearby local over-the-air broadcast channels, but providing hundreds of additional channels. You see there a picture of Ted Turner. And Ted Turner is still with us. He is a guy who was very visionary when it came to cable. television. He conceived of the first superstation, which was WTBS in Atlanta. We just now today call it TBS. It's no longer an Atlanta TV station, but originally it was an Atlanta TV station that he owned, and he put it up on the satellite, and then it was carried by cable systems all over the country in the beginning of the days when cable was beginning to make use of the communication satellites. In the late 70s, early 80s, new cable-only channels began to appear. So no longer were we simply using cable as a way of improving the reception of the nearby local TV stations. So you had ESPN that came along in 1979. You had CNN, the cable news network, which was founded by Ted Turner, came along in 1980. You had MTV in 1981. And each of those videos then shows you the beginning of those channels, and I think you'll enjoy looking at those videos there and see what those channels looked like in the very beginning. Cable channels have taken away a lot of the ratings from broadcast TV simply because we're dividing the pie into many smaller pieces than we once did. Basically, in the beginning of television, the first several decades, you had the three major networks, CBS, NBC, ABC, and a few independent local channels. And that was how the pie was divided. Well, when cable came along, and especially after they began making use of the communication satellites in the 70s and 80s, then you had hundreds of channels. And so just as a natural consequence, the broadcast folks lost a lot of their audience to these new channels. But as you see in that note there, broadcast TV, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox still dominates the ratings. They still broadcast television. The local TV channels still has the greatest share of TV viewers. We're going to get into the internet. Some interesting things to tell you about here. There's a fellow named Jack Kilby, and we don't see his picture on this page, but there is a video I want you to look at. Jack Kilby invented the microchip. And without the microchip, you don't have your smartphone. You don't have your laptop. You don't have your iPad, none of those things. All of that requires the microchip. And so watch the little video here, about 5 minutes of this video on Jack Kilby, who, by the way, is from Dallas, worked for Texas Instruments. And some of you may have worked for Texas Instruments in one capacity or another yourselves, or your parents or relatives have. So that's very much a local story. The Internet origins, the Internet goes back to the 50s. And the Cold War, and I'm not going to get into the whole story of the Cold War. I hope you've learned about that in your history classes in high school and college. But the Internet really begins with the Department of Defense, the U.S. Department of Defense, and the research that was taking place using computers. And they wanted to link these computers together. And so they came up with something called ARPANET in 1969. And the Internet has developed, kind of evolved from that. It's a great video here with the gentleman you see up in the upper left-hand corner. That was when he was much younger, but he is still very much with us. His name is Vint Cerf, and along with one other gentleman, Vint Cerf is considered the father of the Internet. And we have him in a video here called What is the Internet? And I think you will very much enjoy that video, so do have a look at that. Also, Tim Berners-Lee, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, you see in the middle photograph there, is from Great Britain. He is the inventor of the World Wide Web, which is the way that we surf the Internet. And it only goes back to 1990, which doesn't seem like very long ago to me. This is the very first website, if you can imagine, with no art, no video. But when I was first using the Internet, more than 20 years ago, this was the kind of web page we very often did see. The most basic, bare bones kind of thing. This is the very first web page created by Tim Berners-Lee. Do have a look at the video here, in particular Tim Berners-Lee 2, which gets into more depth on the story of Tim Berners-Lee, who is the inventor of the World Wide Web. And again, still very much with us today, and it's a very interesting story about Tim Berners-Lee. On this page, the only thing I really want to emphasize to you is that the Internet and the World Wide Web do not require a government license or a large investment to make use of them, unlike broadcast television and radio, in which you have to have a license from the FCC to broadcast over the airwaves, and then the cost of a television station or even a radio station is very great. But with the Internet and the World Wide Web, you can create your own web page, you can do your own blogging, you can do a podcast yourself. You can upload videos to YouTube. So this is a remarkable thing that has come about in the last 20 years or so, has democratized media to a great extent. And you all kind of take that for granted, understandably, but it has changed the world in a lot of ways. Again, I'm going to kind of, in a longer term class, so in the fall or the spring, we would spend some time talking about the VCR and the DVD and some things that have made home video much more common and easy to do. But there's a line down here about personal video, making social media video and YouTube possible. The fact that you're able so easily to shoot a video with your cell phone and share that video and put it up on YouTube has had all kinds of implications in the world, not just for entertainment, but it has political and social implications. Again, anything that can be shot on video on a cell phone can be seen by millions of people 10 minutes later, and that's a remarkable thing. Have a look there at, you will enjoy the earliest YouTube videos, the first videos that were put up on YouTube. Look at Coney 2012 if you haven't heard of that video before. It's a remarkable thing. It's a 30-minute program. I would not ask you to watch the whole thing. Watch the first few minutes of it perhaps, but it's a remarkable story, Coney 2012. The ability of one person to create a video and put out a message that is seen by millions and millions of people that otherwise the regular media was ignoring. So do have a look there at the video, Coney 2012. All right, very good. And we're going to continue with a new video soon, and we'll be getting into programming and some other topics. But I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.